Hundreds of Russian paratroopers were killed trying to cut off supply lines to the city of Bakhmut. Ukraine shot down another Russian warplane. During a teleconference at the Kyiv Press Center on Monday morning, April 17, Colonel Serhiy Cherevadyi, spokesman for the Eastern Ukraine Military Command, said, "The city of Bakhmut, the site of the heaviest fighting between Russian and Ukrainian troops, has been rocked by nearly 100 shells in the past 24 hours." He said about 30 gunfights took place as both armies battled for control of the city across the street, and even door to door. In one shot, Ukrainian soldiers from the 3rd Shock Brigade can be seen firing from a position inside a dilapidated first-floor apartment, the corner of which has been completely blown off. The continuous sound of gunfire and explosions speaks to what Colonel Cherevadyi described yesterday as the bloodiest battle, unprecedented in recent decades. On Sunday, Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Lieutenant General Igor Konashenkov announced that Wagner mercenaries had captured 2 more bunkers north and south of Bakhmut. The Defense Ministry added that units of Russia's airborne forces are providing support to the Wagner group. Colonel Cherevadyi said that didn't mean much because within a few hours the Ukrainians were able to recapture easily. He also reaffirmed that Wagner's forces had lost their fighting strength and were few in number. Colonel Cherevadyi said that for 72 hours starting on Thursday, the Russians launched a heavy artillery and air assault on Bakhmut and the surrounding area to clear the way for an attack. On Saturday to capture the town of Kromov, which lies along Bakhmut's main supply route from Chasiv Yar to the west. This plan failed, hundreds of Russian paratroopers died in battle. Specific numbers are still being counted. If the Russians win that battle, the logistics of the Ukrainian defenders could come to a standstill, but fortunately our logistics operations will continue, despite the difficulties. We are still able to deliver ammunition, food, medicine, food and get the injured out. It's difficult, of course, but it's doable, he said. Our artillerymen are engaged in counterattack operations to prevent the enemy from continuously firing on the supply lines. The area between Lyman and Kupiansk, which was recaptured by Ukrainian forces 6 months ago, and forms the northernmost part of the line, is under the heaviest firepower with 300 to 400 attacks a day, said Colonel Serhiy Cherevadyi. Said. The Russian army used both artillery and air force. According to the latest information, on Sunday afternoon Ukrainian paratroopers shot down a Russian Su-25 in the nearby town of Chervenopopivka. The Russian pilot may have been surprised that he did not get out of the fighter jet in time, so he exploded with the ship. 2 Ukrainian fighter pilots are being trained to use American Black Hawk helicopters. With promising success. The output showed immediate promise. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the Black Hawk helicopter is superior to the helicopters used by Ukraine, the Mi-8 and Mi-24, almost in all respects. Recently, the Special Forces of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine conducted regular training on the Black Hawk multi-role helicopter in one of the frontline areas. Special Forces have practiced landing combat groups on the battlefield, evacuating, landing from landing cables and night flights, the statement said. State media Ukrinform quoted a helicopter engineer as saying that Ukrainian pilots were very impressed with the aircraft's reliability, ease of operation and survivability. Having experience in operating the Mi-8 and Mi-24, we flew the Black Hawk on the very first day we received it. We just sat down and made the flight, the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Service quoted a Ukrainian pilot as saying. The skills of Ukrainian pilots over the past year have increased a lot, the pilot added. Denmark's acting defense minister Troels Lund Poulsen said on Friday that the country and the United States are also training Ukrainian servicemen, both men and women, to fly in Western fighter jets. Russia is increasingly using GPS-guided aerial bombs weighing up to 500 kilograms launched from aircraft, said Colonel Yuri Ianat, spokesman for the Ukrainian Air Force. Russian planes do not enter our air defense zone, they attack from afar on frontline cities and near the front lines. The peaceful inhabitants of the northern, southern and eastern regions are suffering. There are signs that Russia is preparing for the mass use of 1,500 kilogram KAB bombs launched from aircraft, he warned. He commented that the F-16 fighter jets would help Ukraine fight these bombs more effectively. Ukraine has urged Western allies, including the United States, to provide it with more powerful fighter jets to bolster defense efforts. The war-torn country has specifically promoted the F-16 Fighting Falcon jets. However, the Biden administration has so far refused to provide them to Ukraine. The F-16 is equipped with air-to-air missiles with a range of up to 180 kilometers. This will make it possible to drive enemy aircraft away from our borders and lines, which will reduce the possibility of using guided bombs and other air-launched weapons, Lieutenant General Mykola Oshchuk said, the commander of the Ukrainian Air Force. 3. Ukraine considers Crimea already a battlefield when Putin cancels Victory Day parade in Newsweek. Newsweek has an article titled, Crimea already a battlefield as Putin cancels Victory Day parade, Ukraine, which means Ukraine for the sake of Ukraine. That Crimea was a battlefield when Putin cancelled the Victory Day parade. A Ukrainian official said Crimea has been a battleground this week, as Russian President Vladimir Putin cancelled traditional military parades to mark Victory Day in the face of an expected counteroffensive from Kiev. Denis Chistikov, the deputy permanent representative of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Crimea, told Radio Free Europe on Friday that he believes Crimean residents and the authorities that invaded the Black Sea Peninsula understand that the region ultimately understands the region will return to Ukraine. Crimea was annexed by Putin from Ukraine in 2014, a move not recognized internationally. A yellow terror threat level has been in place in some parts of the peninsula since last April, weeks after Putin's full-blown invasion of Ukraine began. More recently, Russian forces have fortified the peninsula amid fears of a Ukrainian advance. Reconquest of territory is an important war goal for Ukraine. Last summer, Zelensky vowed to take back Crimea, saying that the Kiev army had stayed its course to retake the region since it was annexed. Crimea has been a battlefield, Chistikov said. This is no longer a war between Ukraine and Russia, but a war for the security not only of Ukraine but of the whole world. The official noted that military parades traditionally scheduled for May 9 to commemorate Victory Day, Russia's annual celebration of defeating Nazi Germany in World War II, were cancelled in Crimea. The peninsula celebrated its first Victory Day in 2014. Mr. Chistikov added, in Crimea, this has been another security measure, showing the Crimean people themselves that the situation is not under control. Complete control, as the aggressor government guaranteed. However, this proves that military operations and the liberation of Crimea are approaching, and the aggressor's confusion in their forces is increasing. Tamila Tasheva, Zelensky's top representative in Crimea, said on Friday that many protest movements had sprung up on the peninsula and that Victory Day marches had been cancelled because the Crimean authorities understand that they cannot guarantee security on the territory of the peninsula. We are in constant contact with the people of Crimea. Many people know me personally and write me personal messages even about how Russian equipment moves in Crimea, Tasheva said. A lot of activist actions or movements have appeared on the peninsula, such as the Yellow Ribbon, Crimean Fighting Gull, Crimean Partisans. On the walls of houses in Crimea, they write, "Glory to Ukraine, we are waiting for the armed forces of Ukraine." The Washington Post recently published satellite images from Maxar, a space solutions company, that show Russian forces building a vast network of defensive fortifications on the Black Sea Peninsula and along the seas. Access from southern Ukraine was invaded. Al Jazeera has also released satellite images showing the fortification of defenses around Russia's Sevastopol naval base. Beaches in Crimea are also reportedly closed to swimmers as Russian forces dig trenches and prepare new defensive positions in the area. Chistikov said such defenses showed that the Crimean authorities were not confident that they will hold their own on the defensive. They also built defensive lines for future retreats, he added. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba on Thursday stressed Kiev's demand that Russia withdraw its troops from the peninsula, as well as other invaded areas in Ukraine, Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk and Zaporizhia, for the war to end. We are united with the UN's charter principles and the common belief that Crimea belongs to Ukraine and it will return under Ukrainian control, Kuleba said. Every time you hear someone from any part of the world say that Crimea is somewhat special and should not be returned to Ukraine, nor any other part of our territory, you have to know one thing: Ukraine completely disagrees with these statements. Oleksiy Danilov, head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, said on Twitter on Friday that Ukraine would test and use any weapon not prohibited by international law to liberate the invaded territories, including Crimea. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Foreign Ministry by email for comment. Court documents show that Jack Teixeira leaked documents possibly out of sympathy for Russia. London-based Daily Mail reporter Janin Fisher has a report titled, Exclusive, U.S. Airman, 21 accused of leaking Pentagon's Ukraine secrets posted video of himself shooting Dad's vintage Soviet pistol, court documents claim, which means the 21-year-old U.S. Air Force soldier accused of leaking Ukraine's secrets to the Pentagon posted a video of him firing his father's vintage Soviet pistol. U.S. Air Force Private Jack Teixeira showed off an antique Soviet pistol to his friend, who reported him to the FBI for leaking top-secret U.S. military and intelligence documents about the invasion. Russian invasion of Ukraine. Newly filed court filings say the above. The 20-page petition for a search warrant on his divorced parents' home, cell phone and red 2016 Chevrolet Colorado filed with the court by FBI Special Agent Victoria Horn provides more details on how the federal government plans to file a lawsuit against the U.S. Air Force guard who leaked classified Pentagon documents. Horn wrote in her affidavit that the office confiscated 3 cell phones that the family voluntarily surrendered on April 13, the day that 21-year-old Teixeira was arrested. On Friday, the U.S. court in Boston charged him with 2 counts under the Espionage Act of unauthorized retention and transmission of classified material after he shared sensitive documents with about 50 members of the public. Member of his Discord gaming group called Thug Shaker Central. In court, Teixeira, who faces 15 years in federal prison, per case, kept a calm face, giving no response to plead guilty or plead not guilty. According to the federal agent, about 40 classified documents were photographed or copied for dissemination on the social media platforms of gamers, and they have records showing Teixeira used his access at the Cape Cod Air National Guard base he was assigned to work to see at least one of the documents. He first began posting sensitive information in December 2022, and in January 2023, he began posting photos of classified documents, according to Horn's application for a search warrant. According to the FBI agent, some of the information not only contained classified information, but also described how the United States obtained that information, whether through human sources or satellite communications or a potential error. According to court documents, one of his friends on social media appeared to be the main FBI witness and was the partial basis for searches of the mother's home on Maple Street and the father's home on Walker Street. In North Newton, Massachusetts. He listed both of his parents' homes, less than a mile apart, as his whereabouts on his application for the certification of conduct required for top-secret jobs. An FBI scouting team saw Teixeira drive back and forth between the 2 addresses the day of his arrest and believe he knew the FBI was closing in on him. Horn said Teixeira's friend, who reported him to the FBI, correctly pointed his car in a long line of cars, and confirmed a photo of him with investigators. The anonymous informant told the FBI that the Air Force private had posted a video of him firing a Tokarev gun, which was a Soviet World War II-era semi-automatic pistol they had used. Believed it was part of his father's antique gun collection. The FBI is asking the judge for permission to seize all electronic devices, computers, cell phones, hard drives, USBs, etc. 5. Putin meets Chinese defense minister in Moscow, Kremlin said. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russian President Vladimir Putin met Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu, in Moscow on Sunday. Both sides praised their close military cooperation. According to Peskov, Putin remarked that Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent visit to Russia was very productive, results and relations between Russia and China are developing well in all fields. Peskov said Putin used the meeting to highlight military cooperation as a key area of strength between the 2 countries. On his first foreign trip since becoming defense minister, Li Shangfu said Moscow and Beijing have a very strong relationship, going far beyond the military-political alliances during the war. Cold, according to a statement from the Kremlin. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu was also present at the meeting. The main background: the latest diplomatic talks between Russian and Chinese officials come at a time when the West is increasing scrutiny of the 2 governments' relationship, and how it plays a role in the war in Ukraine. Putin and Xi posed as peace brokers during a friendship visit in Moscow last month, but the Chinese leader's proposals for ending the conflict in Ukraine did not include the Moscow clause. Kwa withdrew from Ukrainian soil and was drafted without any involvement from Kiev. While China and Russia have strengthened ties in recent months, the United States has seen no evidence that China has provided systematic material support to China, according to senior U.S. Treasury officials. The Kremlin, when Putin sought to evade Western sanctions and support the military. 6. Death toll rises to 15 in Russian attacks on Sloviansk. During a press conference at the Kyiv Press Center on Monday morning, April 17, a Ukrainian regional official said the death toll from Friday's Russian rocket attack on residential buildings in Sloviansk, Ukraine, has reached 15 people. Donetsk Governor Pavlo Kyrylenko added that 24 people were injured in the attacks, an increase of 2 from the 22 previously reported total. Kyrylenko said emergency services pulled 5 people, including a 14-year-old girl, from under the rubble. The bodies of 10 victims were found. Some context: the attacks that killed a 2-year-old boy are among the worst attacks on Sloviansk since the start of the year. According to Sloviansk Mayor Vadim Lyaik, at least 8 explosions rocked the city on Friday afternoon local time, when Russian forces attacked the city with S-300 missiles. The attacks hit apartment buildings, residences, administrative buildings and school grounds. 7. Russia is trying to kidnap Ukrainian children in the invaded Zaporizhzhia region, Ukraine's official statement. On March 18, the International Criminal Court, or ICC for short, issued an arrest warrant for a Russian official, Maria Lvova-Belova, and Russian President Vladimir Putin about an alleged scheme to kidnap Ukrainian children to Russia. On Monday, authorities in the Kherson region of southern Ukraine said 24 more children had returned home after being kidnapped and taken to Russian territories. Before that, 32 children had returned to their parents in Kharkiv and Zaporizhzhia regions. These numbers might lead one to think that Maria Lvova-Belova was afraid and sought to return the kidnapped children to their families. However, in a startling development, the intelligence service of Ukraine's defense ministry said on Monday, April 17, that Russian forces are trying to abduct children from their families in the southeastern part of Ukraine that has been invaded. Strategy in an attempt to threaten the people. The warning from the spokesman of the intelligence service of the Ministry of Defense, Oleksiy Dmytrashkovsky, on Ukrainian state television confirmed the statement from the local telegram groups in Enerhodar, a city in the invaded Zaporizhzhia region. Local residents have repeatedly reported children being deported to the Russian-invaded Crimea, using buses from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant as a means of transportation. Ukraine's presidential office recently estimated the total number of Ukrainian children forcibly removed from their homes at least 20,000. Kyiv says thousands of cases are under investigation. 8. Russian airstrikes, 2 teenagers were killed in southern Ukraine. 2 teenagers were killed in Russian attacks on a town in the Mykolaiv region of southern Ukraine early Sunday morning, the regional prosecutor's office said. Russian rockets hit residential buildings and civilian infrastructure in Snayarivka, a town east of the city of Mykolaiv, at around 2:10 a.m. local time on Sunday, April 16, the date Orthodox Easter Sunday. According to the office, a 17-year-old boy and an 18-year-old girl were killed. It is estimated that the invaders fired about 10 S-300 missiles at civilians in Snayarivka. Vitaly Kim, head of the military administration of the Mykolaiv region, said the shelling also caused damage. An educational center, hospital and business establishment. 9. Zelensky praises Ukraine's victory in Orthodox Easter speech. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky on Sunday celebrated Orthodox Easter by commemorating the defenders of Ukraine who fell and urged his compatriots to keep fighting, as Russian airstrikes continued into the night, destroying a church in the southeastern city of Zaporizhzhia. Today, we celebrate the feast of the resurrection of the Lord. The main symbol of this holiday is victory, the victory of good, the victory of truth, the victory of life. We celebrate Easter with unshakable confidence in the irreversible nature of these victories, Zelensky said. The Ukrainian leader acknowledged that perhaps the most difficult peak is ahead of us, but urged Ukrainians to keep fighting until their flag is raised over all the land God has given us, including Crimea, which was annexed by Russia. We, Ukrainians, are one big family. We have a big house. Ukraine. We have a big goal. Win. For everything, said Zelensky. His comments came as Russian forces launched a rocket attack overnight, destroying a church in a village on the outskirts of Zaporizhia, according to Ukraine's state emergency service. Yuri Malashko, head of the Zaporizhia Regional Military Administration, lamented that, for Russians, nothing is sacred, even on Easter Eve.